92-70 in 2022. Their win total, 87.5 at BetMGM. So the book expecting a little bit of regression. They're plus 140 to win the division, 13-1 to win the AL, 25-1 to win the World Series. Their biggest offseason acquisition, signing Josh Bell, first baseman, DH from the Padres, a 2-year, $33 million contract. This team is the class of the division, the favorites, but also, Chelsea, this is not a strong division.
No, it's not. But this is a team that I wouldn't be shocked if they can make some waves in the postseason, because if you remember, they lost to the Yankees 3-2 in the ALDS. But this team has a high potential because it all starts with their starting rotation. One of the best starting rotations, I think, in baseball, especially if we get the Shane Bieber that we saw back when he won the Cy Young in 2020. Plus, Tristan McKenzie is a young guy that seems to be only getting better. If he can get his control under command, this is a guy that has super high strikeout potential. Like, he has electric stuff. And then you have the back end of the bullpen that has Emmanuel Clace, one of the best closers in all of baseball. So it's a team that's not going to knock your socks off with home runs. They hit for average. They have a great rotation. They have a great bullpen. So they're pretty good at winning like close games. Like, if they can keep the score low, it's probably going to be the Guardians. So I think the bet for me on the Guardians would be 13-1 to win the American League. Plus 140 to win the division. Like, I think if it was longer odds, I would like it. But I don't know. I think the good nugget that Bill, our executive producer, put on here, Cleveland was really good at beating up on teams in their own division. Last year, they were 47-29 within divisional play, but just 33-33 against other teams that were not in their division in the American League. So with the schedule changes, maybe that's a little different for the Guardians, but I do think it's a team with a ton of potential.
Yeah, I think so too. And when you look at their lineup, at least, Josh Bell will add some punch for sure. Doesn't really hit for average, and he was okay with the Padres, but can certainly hit for power. This is more of a top-heavy lineup because you obviously have Jose Ramirez. This is a guy who was one of the MVP candidates last season, hit 280, 44 doubles, drove in 126 runs. You've got Andres Jimenez. He finished 6th in AL MVP voting. He's just 24. And then you add Josh Bell. So Stephen Kwan, another guy right there at the top of the lineup who's very talented. So it's the bottom of that lineup that's a little weak, but you're right. They have enough tools here to, I think, make a run. So if I'm going to bet this division, I don't like the value at plus 140, but I do like 13-1 to win the American League. And they've got some interesting pitching as well. A little weak on the back end, but when you there's enough talent, I would say, overall on this roster that there is some value at taking them to win the American League at 13-1.
Well, and also in the postseason, you just need 3 or 4 top-line starters. A lot of times you don't even have to go to your 5th guy because by the time the game 4 rolls around, you can go back to your first starter. So I think the Guardians are built well for the postseason in that regard. And also, like, I'm not a believer in the Yankees that much in the postseason. I think usually they're overhyped. So I do like the Guardians here. If you're interested in betting on the Guardians in any way, their win total 87.5. That seems pretty high. I think I'm staying away from that. They won 92 games last year, and it was a great season for them. And then 25-1 to win the World Series. I don't think I'm super interested in that. I think the ceiling for the Guardians is maybe the ALCS for me, because here's the thing. Even if you don't think the Guardians are going to win the American League, you just need them to get to the ALCS so you can have a hedging opportunity on the other end. Say you take them at 13-1, you can still make a considerable profit if you hedge the other side. So that's the only play I really like from all of those options.
Coming up in 10 minutes here on the show, Chelsea, we're going to go back to the NBA where the Bucks look primed to win another championship. A conversation with J.R. Radcliffe from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel is ahead. She is Chelsea Messenger. I'm Michael Jenkins. This is the Daily Tip from BetQL presented by BetMGM. And the BetQL network is streamed live nationwide on the free Odyssey app and on BetQL.com. Our Major League Baseball preview continues. Let's talk about the starting rotation for the Guardians. And certainly when you look at Shane Bieber, he's about as good as it gets, the ace of the staff, no question about it. But Tristan McKenzie made a big step last year, had an ERA just under 3, 2.96, had a 500 record. And look, he took a huge step. If he takes another step forward this season, all of a sudden, that's a very, very strong 1-2 punch. And McKenzie is just sort of scratching the surface of what he can do. But he certainly seems like a guy who is entrenched as that number 2 guy.
For sure. But I don't think it really matters. Like during the regular season, like a 1 and a 2, it's like 1A and 1B. It doesn't really matter. It's really when you get to the postseason is like when you are deciding, hey, do we really want to put this guy? But also, he is a young guy. His debut was just in 2020, as opposed to Shane Bieber, who won the Cy Young in 2020. So I think you usually go with the veteran presence there if it was a postseason question there. But I think Tristan McKenzie is somebody who you take a long, hard look at his strikeout prop. Last year, his numbers weren't like super overwhelming, but he was averaging at least a strikeout per inning, 190 strikeouts through 191 innings of work, or I guess he's one short of averaging a strikeout per inning. But still, if anybody has electric stuff other than Shane Bieber, it's Tristan McKenzie, and that is the potential you'll see with him in the rotation. So somebody who I will be considering for strikeout props. Also, it always you factor in the number, but still, I'm excited to bet on the Guardians this year. I'm wondering if they're going to be priced the same, because last year I think they were so profitable because people didn't really see them coming. But this year, it's not going to be the case. So we'll see what some of the prices are, but they're not coming out of the woodwork.
I've asked this to the guests that we've had on the show when we're talking about this division in particular, and I want to ask you because I feel like you are definitely someone who is more knowledgeable when it comes to baseball than I am. But how much of the Indians' success this season will be predicated on how talented they are versus how weak this division is? Because it's not the strongest division in baseball.
I don't think it's a weak division, though. The White Sox, if they perform to even like 3/4 of the level of expectations, they have a good roster. Like, it's not that they are not talented. They've just had some injuries. And also the Twins, like, I wouldn't put any money on them to win the postseason, but they have some good pieces. Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton, if they can both stay healthy. So I wouldn't necessarily call this a bad division. Yes, the Tigers are bad. Yes, the Royals are bad, but still, like, games they could definitely lose against divisional foes.
No, it's very true. It's a good point. Not the strongest, but certainly not a terribly weak division. It's top heavy. The bottom sort of falls out. How much do you put into a team that is managed by someone who has a good track record? Like Terry Francona is a guy who has led the Guardians to either a first or second place finish in 7 consecutive years. Their lowest win total over that span is 80 games. That was a COVID year, or non-COVID year, I should say. But they average 92 wins a year. So when you have a guy who's been there, who's been at the pinnacle, do you tend to put more trust in that team because you know the guy leading the way has that experience?
I think it definitely is a good thing, as opposed to the flip side. What we saw from the White Sox last year, Tony La Russa definitely cost them games, the way he was managing those games. So you will not get that from Terry Francona. He's a good manager. Guys like playing for him. He is the players manager. So that's the other thing. I think he's very good at keep clubhouse loose. So if you see a team that's kind of struggling and they're on a losing streak, which is going to happen, it's a long season, I think you have more faith in teams like that with managers who I think have been seasoned and, dealing with players and players like him to get out of that. So yes, it does make a factor or make an impact, I should say, if you're betting on a team, a little more confidence.
Yeah, and when you look at these win totals, something to keep in mind is that scheduling is switching up this year in Major League Baseball. So these teams are going to play less games in the division and more games outside of the division. So when you look at Cleveland last year, they won 92 games, and now their win total is 87 and a hook. The reason why is not necessarily because they're supposed to regress as a team, but because they're playing more teams outside the division, and last year they had a lot more success playing teams within the AL Central.